fellow pen lovers and stationery enthusiasts, it's Christy here, Snarky Wordsworth over on Instagram and Reddit, and today I am going to be swatching my October currently inked fountain pens. I am super duper excited for this one. You guys know already, I love autumn so much. I love everything about it, in particular, all the different color schemes. It actually took me an embarrassingly long time to narrow things down enough that I could do a reasonable October currently inked. But I do think that I picked some really good colors and some really fun pens. There are a couple of brand new to me inks I've not used before, and definitely a couple of brand new pens as well. So I think this is going to be a really fun month of firsts. I think these colors all work very well together as well, so I think a lot of my spreads will be delightfully entertaining to put together. So hopefully this will be a really solid month. So anyway, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get to the swatches. Okay, first up is a Sailor Yurameku ink. This is Kitsune Biyori. I absolutely love this shade so much. If I were less careful about always trying to rotate my inks, I think I would probably have something with this inked up all the time. I really do love it that much. Right now I have this in my brand new Hogtown pen Swansea. This is the Swansea large, by the way. I am obsessed with this pen. I did an initial impressions video just recently. I'll link to that below. But yeah, I love this thing, and it is perfect with the Kitsune Biyori. I mean, it's like it was meant to be. So yeah, I'm already really enjoying this one a whole lot. So let's go ahead and get this one swatched out for you. All right, so that one is Sailor Yurameku's Kitsune Biyori. I love this color. Like I said before, I would have a pen inked up with this constantly if I weren't actively trying to regularly rotate my inks, because I just think this sort of beigey, pinky, peachy tone is so beautiful. And you see what I mean? It's like it was legitimately designed for this pen. I just can't get over that. And I love the shading. I just think this ink is so wonderful. And sometimes I have a hard time with some of the Yurameku inks. Sometimes I find them quite dry, but for whatever reason, Kitsune Biyori generally works pretty well for me. It certainly works very well in this journaler nib. Every once in a while, there are they're Japanese extra fines that I do sometimes feel it's a bit dry for, but usually no problems whatsoever. So, as long as you're more of a Western extra fine or broader nib fan, I think this one should work very well for you. Like I said, you cannot beat this shade. It's just stunning. Okay, next up is another Sailor ink. This one is from the Manyo line, and this is Shirakashi. This color is so beautiful. I really like it. It's a deep greenish brown, very much a color that I think works for a lot of situations. I use it at work a lot without any kind of issues whatsoever. And I have it in another of my new pens. This one is in my Esterbrook in the Quirky Leaf. I really enjoy this one, and it has the Techo nib that I've been dying to try. So I'm really excited to play around with this one this month. I think the color actually works so well. It's a bit of a deeper version of this kind of olive tone, and I I really like this blend together so far. Definitely looking forward to how I can utilize this in the rest of the month. So, Sailor Manyo Shirakashi, you can see already it's got this really, really fascinating brownish green tone. It's one that's really fun to write with as you go along because it does color shift as you are writing. And for whatever reason, I just think that's so fun. I love that when I start a page in a journal, it's going to be one tone, and then by the time I finish, the top of the page is already a slightly different color. I don't know if it's just me, but I find that so satisfying. And this ink is one that does such a good job with that. I mean, you can see here like all of the color shifting properties already, and it's not even completely dry. Now, Shirakashi is a lovely wet ink, I would say. Like the Techo nib does run a bit wet, at least so far in my experience. I have found that like this is like one of my wetter Estie nibs especially, but I really, really like the combo. I mean, I don't find it too wet by any means, so I definitely think this one would be a great, great duo for you to add to your own collections. All right, so next is a Kobe ink. This is Sorakuen Tea Green. I recently picked this up when I was at the San Francisco Pen Show, and it is just such a lovely, deep, rich green color. I love greens, but I don't have anything quite this shade, so I was definitely really excited to see how this one turned out, and I have that inked up in my Tailored Pen Company Westminster, and this is in their matcha bubble tea. And I've got the gold hardware. There's the roll stop. It's a little straw. And it just has a fine nib, but this is a very wet writer, and you really get to see all the gorgeous characteristics in that Kobe ink. It is a stunner. So let's go ahead and get this swatched. Okay, so this is another one of those inks that starts out like a really deep, rich, foresty green and then lightens up into this slightly brighter tone as it dries. And it's just, again, I think that's such a fun characteristic of ink. I love it. It's like two inks in one. And it's without like all of the chromo shading, because sometimes I just am not interested in a chromo shader. Sometimes I just want like a really beautiful ink that does have shading, but not necessarily a million colors in it. But yeah, I really do think the Sorakuen Tea Green is a lovely, lovely shade, and it does work very well in this particular nib. Not too wet, certainly not dry. Definitely has a nice, smooth quality to it. So yes, definitely a highly recommended ink for any green fan. Next up is a very new to me ink. This is Lennon Toolbar's Bubble Tea. Super cute, right? I love everything about this packaging, for real though. I only just recently received this. I did a swatching video of my 4 Lennon Toolbar inks that I got in my order, and I love all of them, but this one especially just really, really resonates with me. It's a lovely, very light shade of tan, and I have this inked up in my vintage Parker 51. This is in the Cocoa, and it is a Demi rather than a standard size, but I really do love it. And it's got a fine nib in here, and it's light, but it's definitely legible. So I'm going to swatch this and let you get a look at it. I did have a lot of questions about how things looked via like a standard nib rather than my dip pens. So hopefully this will give you a little better of an idea. So Lennon Toolbar's Bubble Tea really is very much a lovely, light, milky tea color. It's definitely not one of those bold, rich browns, but I think this shade is utterly lovely. It definitely matches very, very well with the cocoa color of this Parker 51, but I think it would work well in pretty much any lighter brown pen if you are like me and one of those people who likes to match inks to pens. I think it's a stunning color. Like seriously, I really, really love this. There is not a huge amount of shading when you're using a fine nib. I have like played around with it in my dip pens and there's a little bit more shading, but it is quite subtle. So I would not call this like a heavy shader by any means, but there is light shading and it is a very pretty color. So if that's those are qualities that you enjoy, it really is very legible. Like I said, light but easy to read. So if those are things that you're looking for and you're curious about this ink, I definitely think it's worth giving a try. All right, next up is Wearingeul Scarecrow. I think this shade is absolutely lovely. I'm a big fan of Wearingeul in general, but I think their browns are always so, so pretty. Their browns and their like fleshy tones, those are so spot on as far as lovely shades, good shading, great formulation, and this one is no different. I've got this inked up in my vintage Platinum 3776. This is in the Ishigaki, the calico color, and rather than a 14 karat nib, the older vintage ones have an 18 karat nib, and man, let me tell you, this is so wonderful to write with. Like, I'd only ever had the Platinum 3776 in the Sakura celluloid, and that has the 14 karat nib, and I liked it. I didn't hate it or anything, but it definitely was a very, in my mind, stiff nib, one that had very little bounce, kind of like writing on a nail, in not a bad way, but just in that very firm, very solid way. But this, there's definitely more of a sort of responsive feel to it, and I like it a lot. And it does work very well with the Scarecrow. I was a little nervous if this would be too dry for it, but it absolutely isn't. It works really, really well. So let's go ahead and get this swatched so you can see how these work together as a duo. All right, as you can see, this color is so interesting. It's kind of a very yellow leaning olive, and I think I was just surprised because when I think of Scarecrow, I think more of like browns and yellows, whereas this sort of olive tone just, I don't know, came out of nowhere for me, but it works really, really well. Lovely formulation. I do find platinum nibs to be quite fine, even though this is an 18 karat medium. I would say it writes more like a lot of standard fines do, and I have no problems with this formula in it. It still glides across the page, and it just looks really cool. I just really enjoy this color. Like I said, unusual for me. I definitely lean towards more browny kind of olives and more grayish olives. But this yellow one is just really pretty and really interesting. And it's quite a good match for the actual packaging. So yeah, if you like this sort of yellowy brown olive tone, this one might be one for you to check out. All right, the next ink is one that has been on my to buy list for so long, but for whatever reason, I just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. So when I ended up at the Dromgool's table during their last day at the San Francisco Pen Show, they had this big buy three, get one free sale. And so I saw this was one of them and I was like, this is a sign. And I am so glad that I did. This is a gorgeous golden shimmer ink. I love this color. It is so beautiful. Just the perfect amount of yellow, the perfect amount of shimmer in it. It's very, very easy to read, even though it's yellow, because that can be difficult for me. But yeah, it is wonderful. And like I said, I really do love Wearingeul's formulations, whether we're talking about your standard ink or a shimmer ink. So I have this in my Pilot Vanishing Point with an SU nib, and it's working very, very well. I was honestly a little bit nervous just because this Tableau nib is definitely one that doesn't love shimmer inks all the time. I have had some where it works perfectly fine, and I've had some where it's hard stops every single time I click it. But so far, I inked it up on Saturday night, and I've been using it since then, and I am having no issues whatsoever. And like I said, this ink is so beautiful. So let's get this swatch down so you can see. Okay, so you can see in the swatch, of course, there's loads and loads of shimmer, like crazy shimmer, and it's definitely very, very wet still. But it's much harder to see the shimmer in the text, and yet in real life, it's very easy to see. I don't know why that is on the camera, that some shimmer inks have a hard time picking up, but just rest assured, loads of shimmer throughout the text. You can also see some amazing, amazing shading. This is definitely like a high shading ink, and I am 100% here for it because it doesn't shade so light a yellow that you can't read it. That's what's amazing. It in fact goes from like a moderate yellow to almost a gold orange, and I love it. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful ink, and I just can't get over how much I enjoy writing with this. When I first swatched it for my pen show ink swatch video, I was already like quite enamored, so I'm very, very excited to actually get to use it for a full month. I'm probably going to write this thing dry at least once, if not more than once. But yes, definitely excited to get to play around with this one. All right, next up is Montblanc Petit Prince Red Fox. This is a sample that I got from Lau over at Kenchan Crafts. I had told him how much I admired this shade, and of course he remembered and sent it to me in an ink swap. And I'm finally going to use it this month, and I am using it in my Esterbrook Estie. These two are so delightful together, like just so cute. And I really love this sort of muted orange red shade. It's just right in my wheelhouse, and I love this pen. This is one of my all-time favorites. This is the Esterbrook Estie in the exclusive Esterbrook site Cola color. So it's like this rich sort of brownish orange red, and they are just sort of designed for one another, and I really am having a good time with them so far. Just as mentioned, such a good combination here. I love that sort of slightly subdued reddish orange from the Petit Prince, and it looks so very much like the reddish orange that's already going on in the Cola Estie. I just love this. So the Estie has a journaler nib, and I really think it shows off all of the best qualities of this particular shade. You've got a good amount of shading in here, no sheen. I'm not a sheen fan, so it's not super often that you will see me with a sheening ink, and this is no different. Definitely leans in the shading direction. Perfectly legible, not super in your face, because I also am not crazily into overwhelmingly bright colors a lot of times, especially once we get into that orange and red range. It's like I said, if you're looking for something a little subtle, a little bit unsaturated, this is so great. Yeah, writes quite comfortably. I would say it's kind of an average flow, not dry at all. I wouldn't categorize it as a wet ink, but definitely comfortable. Does very well in this journaler, and I think is just kind of a delightful ink to add to any collection. All right, next up is one of my all-time favorite Diamine shades. This is Writer's Blood. It's gorgeous, deep red, kind of bordering on like a burgundy oxblood kind of color. Now, this one is quite a wet ink, and so I have it in my Franklin-Christoph number 46. This has a medium Nagahara nib in it. I love the way that this nib looks. I think it makes beautiful letters, but I do like a wetter ink in it. It's not terribly dry, but it's definitely more dry than some of my more specialty grinds. So this is wonderful in it, and it makes everything just look amazing. If I weren't afraid that it would stain the barrel, I 100% would eyedropper this with this color because I love it that much, and I love it in this combo that much. You can see there's not like an enormous amount of shading, but it is there. It's quite subtle, but I like it. I just love this color. I just really love this shade. It's like a dark burgundy oxblood, and it just really looks amazing with this kind of nib. I mean, there's just something about it. And I love writing with this pen. I don't know, the experience itself with this combo is definitely one of my favorites, and I actually have this inked up quite often just to put in my like traveling journals and just write for pages and pages because I like the combo so much. So definitely recommend the ink for anybody who likes this kind of shade and is looking for a wetter ink. But if you happen to be able to get a Nagahara medium nib with this, do it. It is wonderful. All right, last ink of the month. This is a Birmingham Pen Company shade, Weathered Brick. Much like the name sounds, it does have this lovely dark weathered brick color. So you've got that sort of unsaturated red going on. Looks like it's been out in the elements for ages and ages, and I have it inked up in my beloved Pilot E95S. I love this pen so much, and I do have that champagne with the red body, and it looks so good with this particular ink. Now, my E95S is a very, very, very wet writing extra fine, and I've had some very, very wet Birmingham Pen Company inks, so I wasn't sure that this was going to be a duo that would work, but on testing before I made this video, it seemed like a very good pair. So let's go ahead and swatch, and I'll let you be the judge. You know I'm excited about an ink when I manage to mess up the text part of the swatch. But anyway, I really do love this color so much. There's not an enormous amount of shade, but in an extra fine nib, I'm not really expecting that in any way. This is generally a wet writer, but it does just fine with this particular ink. I don't necessarily think this ink is dry. I just think it works quite well. I would say it's an average flowing ink, and it just looks so good. I hope the camera is picking up how good of a match this is. And as somebody who likes to match pens with ink, this just makes my day. I used this one all day, including throughout a very long meeting, and you know, I enjoyed my notes. I'm not gonna lie. I had no problems keeping focused, and this ink definitely helped. If you are looking for a lovely sort of reddish brown, unsaturated ink, you might give Weathered Brick a try. It is very pretty and looks great in the Pilot E95S. So with the exception of my Star Spattered Hill, everything else is completely dried down. Some of the swatch in Star Spattered Hill is still a little tacky, but I don't want to lose any more light, so let's go ahead and do some close-ups. Here's the Sailor Yurameku Kitsune Biyori, one of my all-time favorite inks in general. Below that is the Sailor Manyo Shirakashi. Look at that shading. Below that is the Kobe Ink Sorakuen Tea Green. And at the very bottom of this page is my Lennon Toolbar Bubble Tea. Now, like I said before, it is quite light, but still totally legible, and that's even in a fine nib. Here's the Wearingeul Scarecrow. below that Wearingeul, a star-spattered hill. I'm hoping that I can get this at an angle where you can actually see all of the shimmer, because there is quite a lot throughout all of that text. And even if you can't quite get the shimmer, can you see that shading? That shading is crazy. So beautiful. This is definitely going to be one of my picks of the month. I can already tell you right now. There's the Montblanc Petit Prince Red Fox. Diamine's Writer's Blood. And then Birmingham Pen Company's Weathered Brick. Okay, so these are my October currently inked fountain pen colors. Look at this palette. How absolutely perfect for me is this? Like, I just can't get over it. I am so glad that I took the extra time to really play around with my options, because I think this is going to be so fun to make different spreads with. Like, just look at them. They're so awesome. Anyway, if you happen to have any questions about any of these inks or any of the pens that I'm using or anything that you've seen today or whatever, please do feel free to pop those questions in the comments. I'm always happy just to chat with other people. That's one of the things that I love the most about this hobby, is that it's a really open and welcoming community. So like I said, feel free to comment, whatever. If this video has been entertaining, useful, helpful in any way, please do consider giving me a thumbs up or potentially even subscribing to the channel. As always, thank you so much for joining me. If you have stayed to the end of this video, you are everything that is awesome. Once again, thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you next time. Bye-bye.